Hello, everybody. Welcome back to lesson 1.3. And today we're looking at the paint bucket gradient tool, and we might get into using some different selection techniques here. So paint bucket is G on the keyboard, is the hotkey. So we can see if we're on the hand tool, we hit G, brings this up. So let's open up our layers dock right now, and let's just go and zoom in here. What we're going to do is we're going to paint in this uh, Celtic knot area. And so remember last time we used the magic wand to make a little bit of a more complex selection before we filled it with color. So this time what we're going to do is something similar. We're going to take the Celtic knot and we're going to take our magic wand selection tool, and that seems to be disappearing. There it is. I was on the object selection tool. We don't want that. So let's take our magic wand and we're just going to add to our selection holding shift, and we're just going to go all the way around the image, selecting different parts of the area. All right, great. So now what we actually want to do is we're going to go down and create a new color layer. You can see our previous color layer we actually didn't get a chance to name, so we should definitely do that. But for now, this is the, I'm going to work with a little bit of a green color, so I'm going to call this green knot. And then I actually am a little concerned about how far the selection is going right up to the edge. It might have gone into some areas and it might be bleeding off into this negative space on the brown background. So I think what I want to do is I'm actually going to do a little bit of this advanced selection by going down to select, modify, going to expand, and I'm just going to again do 2 pixels, just like a little bit of expansion going into the black there, so there's no weird artifacts, and artifacts would just make it look not that great. So let's do it. Let's find a nice green. And again, what I want to do is I'm going to make a selection here because this red color is really appealing to me. So I'm going to basically create a green that falls in line with the same hue of this color, or set the same tone. And so by going to the color palette, you can see we're kind of deep in the saturated mode. We're over in the red area, and I just want to drag this, or you can click anywhere you'd like to select. I got some nice blues happening here. I think I'm going to stick with more of a greenish blue just to stay true to form so that we don't get too far off course in terms of our color harmony. I'm going to warm it up. I'm going to like desaturate this a little bit so it's a little less dark. And coming into our green, let's fill this with the paint bucket. And you know by now that I've been using this hotkey, Alt Backspace. Well, essentially, the paint bucket is literally that hotkey. So if I click, you can see it's just going to fill the selection right there, and it looks pretty good. Actually, it looks quite good. So if we actually go up and hide the knot, Celtic knot, we can see that the green is actually filling a really pretty nice shape. It's completing the shapes really nicely. So it's underneath the line art, so it looks pretty darn good. So next, let's do that paint bucket again. And this time, what I want to do is I'm going to hold down Alt, click the paint bucket, and we can see it's going to cycle through different tools. So the 3D material is not what we want to use here. Let's go for the gradient. And gradient it's basically a blending of 2 different colors. So it's actually, you can actually change these settings, and there's a whole bunch of different options. If you click on the gradient editor, you can see right now it's set to foreground transparent, and that's what it's just set to. But we also have all these different presets. So we've got the basics are basically just foreground to background. So it's selecting the current foreground color and transitioning into whatever the background color is. Then we've also got the foreground color to transparency, and that could be really handy when we're doing some tone with digital art, with painting later on when you're trying to create some shadows. And then we just have pure black to pure white, and that's another sort of basic gradient. But so for now, let's stick with this with our current mode of foreground to background. But what I want to do is I want to double click this area, or excuse me, this transparency area, which allows me to bring up the color. It's going to select whatever color this is. So the foreground color we're going to adjust. And I think I want to make it darker. I think I'm going to go darker here. And I'm actually going to make it like more saturated towards black, because that'll look really, this green is going to really pop on top of that if the background is darker. Hit OK. And then I'm going to do something interesting. I'm actually going to double click here. And instead of going from two different colors, I actually want it to go closer to our foreground color. And I'm going to drag it down maybe like 5%. And so we can see, and actually that looks pretty good, but let's go even darker with our, this foreground color. Let's pull it down a little more. There you go. So we can see we got this nice green situation here, this green gradient. We see we have some different options. We can even name it if we want. We could save it. I can hit new, name this thing as like green grad or gradient. Hit OK. And all right, so now we have it selected. So there it is. So if we click here on the checkbox, you can see it shows up at the bottom of our palette. We have a lot of different preset options. There's some pretty cool ones and some horrible ones in there. So we have a choice now. We can actually choose different styles of gradients. So we have the linear gradient, radial gradient, angled gradient, reflected gradient, and diamond gradient. And the two I typically use the most, I probably never use these three. I almost primarily always use either linear or radial. And I actually want to do a radial one here, but just for the sake of showing you, I want to show you the different ones. So let's start with the linear one. And again, I'm going to make a selection, holding down Alt to get this circular, nice circle selection going on. And oh, it didn't take very well. Let's try it again. Hold down Alt. Sometimes my computer runs a little strange when I'm video recording at the same time as running Photoshop. There we go. So adjusting it with the arrow tools. There we go. It looks pretty good. So we got a green knot. I'm going to make a new layer underneath that because we want that to show through. And I'm double clicking on the word later because I actually want to keep the two because this is the second of the green knot. And I'm going to just hit G, get back to our gradient tool. And I'm going to click and I'm just going to drag from the center point. You can see we have this line that's coming out from the middle axis. And this is essentially showing us how far out, like what's the distance our gradient is going to be. So if I click from the middle and I drag way out, it's going to look pretty much like that pure color in the foreground because it's stretching it so far beyond the length of the border that it doesn't actually register as a gradient almost. But if we take it in a little bit, we can see the top is this actual color that we chose, this, the second color, and the first color is at the bottom. So it looks pretty cool. We can try different angles, can kind of experiment. I mean, if this were like trying to make it realistic looking, three-dimensional looking, we might choose a direction that feels right to the lighting of the piece. But for this, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to keep it really basic. And actually, I'm going to try a radial gradient just to see how this looks. Oh yeah, that looks pretty cool. That's kind of what I was going for. And it looks good, but we actually want to switch the dark inside color and the dark outside color. So how do we do that? And we can actually leave this gradient here and just do another one on top of it, and it'll overlap it. So how do we do that? Well, we click on our gradient, and how are we going to switch these colors? Well, one way to do it is to just drag. You can see we can actually click and drag this color in one direction and drag the other one in the other direction. Oops, I lost it. If you drag it off of too far down, it actually removes that anchor point. So you can see there. And this is actually a cool feature because look at this. Like we can actually drag how the transition of the color looks, right? So that's pretty nice. And in fact, I'm going to make this more, this is a little subtle. I'm going to make it a little more intense. So I'm actually going to I'm going to select the color of the Celtic knot, and I'm going to go past it. I'm going to go brighter. So we get this bigger range of colors. So you can really see what I'm doing here. And I'm actually going to pull this further in so we have less of a bright hotspot. Well, actually, we'll see what it does. It might actually give us an even brighter hotspot. Oh yeah, okay, so that looks pretty good. There we go. So if we select out we can see it's kind of, that's better. That looks more like what I'm trying to do. We can try different things. So radial gradient is pretty cool. Like it gives us this sort of orbital look. You can see the hotspot is not that bright, but as I drag further away, the hotspot gets bigger. So something like that. Let's just leave it for now. And it's not that, it's not that obvious that this is a gradient. It's a little bit subtle, which is okay. It's extremely subtle, actually.